The first time Emma Collins saw Daniel write, it was raining. Not the soft, romantic kind of rain that falls gently like in the movies. It was the chaotic London kind, the sky pouring relentlessly as people rushed past each other with umbrellas colliding like swords. Emma stood under the narrow shade of a bookstore entrance, clutching a folder of job applications to her chest, silently praying the rain would stop. That was when she noticed him. He was standing in the rain without an umbrella, completely drenched, staring at the closed cafe across the street as if he had just lost something important. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his white shirt was soaked through, yet he didn't move. Emma hesitated. She wasn't the kind of girl who talked to strangers. She had moved to London only 3 months ago after finishing university. Her plan was simple: find a job, build a stable life, and avoid unnecessary heartbreak. Love had never worked out well for her. She believed love was a distraction. But something about the way he stood there, still, defeated, made her step forward. "You'll catch a cold," she said softly, holding her umbrella toward him. He turned slowly, surprised. His eyes were a deep brown, filled with exhaustion and sadness. "I think I already have," he replied with a faint smile. She moved closer, sharing her umbrella. They stood awkwardly side by side as the rain continued to pour. "Were you waiting for someone?" Emma asked carefully. He let out a quiet laugh. "I was supposed to meet my girlfriend, but she texted me 10 minutes ago. She's not coming." Emma didn't know what to say. She had been in that place before. The sudden ending, the unexpected goodbye. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shrugged. "I guess some stories end before they really begin." For a moment, they simply listened to the rain. "I'm Emma," she said finally. "Daniel." That was how it started. Over the next few weeks, Emma kept running into Daniel in the most unexpected places. At the bus stop, in the same bookstore where she spent her afternoons reading free novels, even at the small park near her apartment. It felt like coincidence at first, but soon it felt like fate. They began talking more, about everything. Daniel was an architect who had recently started his own small firm. He had big dreams, but carried quiet fears of failure. Emma, on the other hand, was still searching for her place in the world. She wanted to become a writer, but rejection emails filled her inbox. "You're too hard on yourself," Daniel told her one evening as they sat on a park bench, sharing takeaway coffee. "And you're not hard enough on yourself," she teased back. He laughed. "Maybe we balance each other." The friendship grew naturally. There was no pressure, no expectations, just comfort. But sometimes, late at night, Emma found herself thinking about the way Daniel looked at her when she spoke passionately about her stories. And Daniel noticed how Emma's laughter made even his worst days feel lighter. Yet both were afraid. Emma had promised herself not to fall in love again, not after her ex left her for someone more exciting. And Daniel was still healing from the woman who had chosen ambition over him. So they pretended. Pretended that their hands brushing against each other meant nothing. Pretended that the silence between them wasn't filled with unspoken feelings. Pretended that they were just friends. Everything changed the night Emma received another rejection email. She was sitting on her apartment floor, tears slipping down her cheeks, when her phone buzzed. "Daniel." "I'm outside," he said. She opened the door to find him holding 2 cups of hot chocolate and a small chocolate cake. "For the future best-selling author," he said confidently. Emma tried to smile, but her tears betrayed her. "I'm not good enough," she whispered. "Maybe I should give up." Daniel stepped inside, setting the drinks down. "Look at me," he said gently. She raised her tearful eyes. "Do you know why I like buildings?" he asked. She shook her head. "Because before they become beautiful, they are just dust, noise, and broken pieces. Construction is messy, but that doesn't mean the building won't stand tall one day." He paused. "You're under construction, Emma. That doesn't make you a failure." Her heart raced. No one had ever believed in her like that. "Why do you care so much?" she asked quietly. He hesitated, because this was the moment he had been avoiding. "Because," he said slowly, stepping closer, "I think I've been falling in love with you since the day you shared your umbrella." The world seemed to stop. Emma felt fear rise inside her, the fear of being hurt again. But she also felt something stronger: hope. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," Daniel replied. He reached for her hand, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. "Let's be scared together," he whispered. And for the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself to believe that love didn't always end in pain. Months passed. Emma finally got her first short story published in an online magazine. Daniel's firm secured its first major project. They celebrated the small victories like they were the biggest achievements in the world. There were arguments, of course, days when insecurities resurfaced, moments when Emma doubted whether she deserved happiness, times when Daniel feared she might outgrow him. But they talked. They chose each other again and again. One year after that rainy afternoon, Daniel took Emma back to the same bookstore entrance where they first met. It was raining again. "This feels familiar," Emma said, smiling. Daniel took a deep breath. "I used to believe some stories end before they begin," he said softly, "but you proved me wrong." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Emma's heart pounded. "You didn't save me," he continued. "You stood beside me while I saved myself, and I want to do the same for you, for the rest of my life." He knelt down despite the rain. "Emma Collins, will you marry me?" Tears mixed with raindrops on her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the rain felt different this time, warmer, softer. Love hadn't come to rescue them. It had come quietly, in shared umbrellas, late-night encouragement, and messy construction phases. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and sometimes that's all love needs to be. The rain didn't stop that night, but Emma didn't mind. She and Daniel ran through the streets laughing like children, soaked and breathless, her engagement ring catching the city lights every time she lifted her hand. It felt unreal. Just a year ago, they were strangers hiding from the same storm. Now they were planning forever. Yet forever, Emma would soon learn, was not built in a single beautiful moment. The first few weeks after the engagement were magical. They told friends. They called family. Emma's mother cried on the phone, whispering, "I always knew someone would see your heart." Daniel moved into Emma's small apartment temporarily while they searched for a bigger place. They spent evenings browsing wedding venues online, debating flowers, cakes, and guest lists. "I don't want anything too big," Emma said one night, curling her legs under her. "I know," Daniel smiled. "You'd rather spend the money on books." "And you'd rather spend it on building models," she teased. Everything felt light. Until reality knocked. 2 months later, Daniel's firm lost a major contract unexpectedly. A client pulled out at the last minute due to financial issues. It was their biggest project of the year. Emma found him sitting in the dark one evening, laptop open but untouched. "They're letting go of 2 junior architects," he said quietly. "I have to tell them tomorrow." Emma's heart tightened. She knew how much Daniel valued his team. "You built this company from nothing," she reminded him. "And I might lose it," he replied. The fear in his voice was different this time, deeper. Wedding deposits had already been paid. A new apartment lease was signed. Suddenly, the future felt fragile. That night, Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Was this how things started falling apart? She hated herself for thinking it. The tension slowly crept in. Daniel became quieter, distracted. He worked longer hours chasing smaller projects to keep the firm alive. Emma tried to be supportive, but her own insecurities began whispering again. What if he regrets proposing? What if I become another burden? One evening, she found herself staring at a job offer email from a publishing company in Manchester. It wasn't her dream job, but it was stable, reliable, and far from London. She hadn't told Daniel yet. When he finally came home past midnight, exhausted, she blurted it out. I got an offer today. Daniel looked up, surprised. That's amazing. It's in Manchester. Silence filled the room. For how long? He asked. It's permanent. He leaned back slowly. So you'd move? I don't know, she replied defensively. It's a real opportunity. And what about us? He asked. The question hung heavy. Emma felt frustration rise. I can't pause my life every time things get hard, and I can't abandon my company every time something shiny appears, Daniel snapped. They both froze. It was the first time their words felt sharp enough to hurt. The next morning, Emma left early without saying goodbye. All day, she replayed the argument in her mind. Love wasn't supposed to feel like this. It wasn't supposed to feel like choosing between dreams. When she returned home that evening, Daniel was there, sitting at the kitchen table, 2 cups of tea waiting.
I'm sorry, he said first. She exhaled. Me too. He looked tired, but determined. I don't want you to give up your dreams, he said softly. I fell in love with a woman who fights for her stories, and I don't want you to give up your firm, she replied. They stared at each other, both realizing something important. Love wasn't about choosing one dream over another. It was about building a new one together. What if, Daniel began carefully, we think long-term. You take the job for now. Gain experience. Build your name. I'll stabilize the firm here. We tried distance temporarily. Emma blinked. Long distance. Just for a while, he said. If we're strong enough to survive rainstorms and rejection letters, we're strong enough to survive train rides. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from understanding. You'd do that, she whispered. I'd cross cities for you, he replied. The months that followed were hard, harder than either expected. Video calls replaced late-night park walks. Weekend train journeys replaced spontaneous coffee dates. There were days when Emma felt lonely in her small Manchester flat. Nights when Daniel fell asleep at his desk in London. But something unexpected happened. They grew stronger. They learned to communicate better. To say, I miss you, instead of hiding it. To talk through jealousy, stress, exhaustion. Emma's articles began getting noticed at the publishing house. Daniel secured 2 new clients and managed to keep his firm afloat. Every time doubt tried to creep in, they reminded each other, we're building something bigger than distance. 1 year later, on a bright spring afternoon, Emma stepped off a train in London holding a small envelope. Daniel was waiting at the platform. She ran into his arms. I quit, she said breathlessly. His eyes widened. What? I didn't give up my dream, she smiled. I got promoted. They're opening a London branch. They offered to transfer me. Relief washed over his face. You're coming back. I'm coming home. This time, there were no storms, no uncertainty, just certainty. 6 months later, they stood in a small garden surrounded by close friends and family. Simple decorations, soft music, no extravagance. Exactly how Emma wanted. As she walked toward Daniel in her white dress, she remembered the girl hiding from the rain with a folder of rejection letters. And she silently thanked her, because that girl had chosen to share an umbrella. When Daniel took her hands at the altar, he whispered, still scared. She smiled. Yes. He squeezed her fingers gently. Good, he said. That means we still care. And as they said their vows under a clear sky, Emma realized something powerful. Love wasn't about perfect timing. It wasn't about easy paths. It was about two imperfect people choosing each other. Again, and again, and again. And this time, there was no rain. Only sunlight. Marriage didn't change everything overnight. It changed the small things. Emma woke up one morning and realized Daniel's shoes were permanently beside the door. His coffee mug had a designated place in the cabinet. His quiet humming while brushing his teeth had become part of the soundtrack of her life. And somehow, that felt bigger than the wedding day. The first year of marriage was peaceful, almost suspiciously so. Emma thrived in her new position at the London branch of the publishing company. Her confidence grew with every article she edited, every meeting she led. For the first time, she wasn't chasing validation. She was earning it. Daniel's firm stabilized. Slowly but steadily, projects became consistent. He hired back one of the architects he had once been forced to let go. They celebrated small victories the way they always had. Cheap takeaway food, late-night walks, shared laughter on the couch. But life, Emma learned, never stays still. It started with a phone call. Daniel's father had collapsed at home in Brighton. A mild stroke, the doctor said. He would recover, but he would need support. Daniel was quiet the entire train ride to the hospital. Emma held his hand tightly. Family had always been complicated for Daniel. His father was proud but distant, rarely expressing affection. Yet seeing him lying in a hospital bed, fragile, human, shook something inside Daniel. "We should bring him to London," Daniel said that night. Emma didn't hesitate. "Then we will." And just like that, their life shifted again. Having his father move into their small apartment wasn't easy. There were adjustments. Privacy disappeared. Space felt limited. Emma sometimes found herself missing the quiet evenings she and Daniel once shared. Daniel, meanwhile, carried a new weight: guilt for not being closer to his father before, fear of losing him, pressure to be strong. They were both tired. One evening, after a long day at work, Emma walked into the kitchen to find Daniel and his father arguing. "You don't need to control everything," Daniel said sharply. "I'm not helpless," his father replied stubbornly. Emma stepped back silently. That night, she lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, just like she had during the early days of their engagement. Was this what marriage really meant? Constant adjustments, endless responsibility. She felt selfish for even thinking it. A week later, something unexpected happened. Daniel's father called her into the living room. "Sit," he said gently. She obeyed, slightly nervous. "I know I've been difficult," he admitted. "I'm not used to needing help." Emma smiled softly. "None of us are." He studied her for a moment. "You love him very much," he said. "With everything," she replied without hesitation. He nodded slowly. "Then don't let him carry everything alone. He thinks being strong means being silent." Her heart tightened. That night, she found Daniel sitting on the balcony, staring at the city lights. "You don't have to protect me from your fear," she said quietly as she sat beside him. He didn't look at her at first. "I'm supposed to hold everything together," he whispered. "You're not a building," she replied gently. "You're allowed to crack sometimes." He let out a breath that sounded like months of tension leaving his body. And for the first time since his father's stroke, he cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. Emma held him, realizing something important again. Love wasn't just about romantic rain and wedding vows. It was about standing beside someone when they feel like they're falling apart. Months passed. Daniel's father grew stronger. Physical therapy worked. Laughter slowly returned to the apartment. And then one quiet Sunday morning, Emma stared at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. Her hands trembled. She wasn't scared in the same way she used to be, but she was overwhelmed. When she showed Daniel, he blinked at the test like it was written in another language. "Is this real?" he asked. She nodded, tears forming. He looked at her, and then he laughed. A full, joyful, slightly terrified laugh. "We're going to be parents," he said, almost in disbelief. Yes, she whispered. And suddenly, the apartment felt too small again, but in a different way. Pregnancy brought new challenges. Emma felt exhausted, emotional, unsure of herself. Daniel tried to be everywhere at once, supporting her, running his firm, helping his father regain independence. There were moments of tension. "You don't have to do everything," Emma told him one night. "I want to," he replied, "but I need you rested, not heroic." They both laughed softly. They were learning, again, that balance wasn't automatic. It was intentional. On a cool autumn evening, as golden leaves covered the streets of London, Emma went into labor. The hospital room felt surreal. Daniel held her hand exactly the way he had on that rainy day years ago, steady, present, unafraid. After hours that felt endless, a cry filled the room. Small, powerful, alive. Daniel stared at their daughter in awe. "She's perfect," he whispered. Emma, exhausted but glowing, smiled through tears. "What should we name her?" he asked softly. Emma looked at him thoughtfully. "Hope," she said, because that's what she had been from the beginning. Hope in the rain, hope during distance, hope and fear, hope and uncertainty. Later that night, as Emma watched Daniel gently rock their newborn daughter, she felt something settle deep inside her. Their story had never been perfect. There had been storms, distance, fear, responsibility, tears. But through every chapter, they had chosen each other. And now, watching Daniel kiss their daughter's tiny forehead, Emma realized something even more beautiful. Love doesn't end at "I do." It evolves. It stretches. It grows. Just like buildings under construction. Just like dreams finding their shape. And as rain began tapping softly against the hospital window, once more Emma smiled. Because this time, she wasn't hiding from it. She had built a home inside the storm. Years passed more quickly than Emma ever imagined. Hope grew from a tiny, fragile newborn into a curious little girl with bright eyes and endless questions. She had Daniel's thoughtful silence and Emma's expressive heart. She loved books before she could properly read them and insisted on helping. Her father designed buildings with colorful crayons. Their apartment eventually became too small, not because of tension or struggle this time, but because of life expanding beautifully. They moved into a modest house just outside London. It had a small garden where Hope planted flowers every spring, even though most of them didn't survive. Daniel would gently replant them at night, making sure something always bloomed by morning. Emma noticed, but she never told Hope. Some magic, she believed, was worth protecting. Marriage, they discovered, wasn't a destination. It was movement. There were still disagreements about parenting, finances, time. There were days when Emma felt overwhelmed balancing motherhood and her career, and nights when Daniel questioned whether he was giving enough to both his family and his firm. But they had learned something powerful over the years. Silence was more dangerous than conflict. So they talked. When Emma felt invisible, she said so. When Daniel felt pressure building inside his chest, he admitted it. When exhaustion made them impatient, they apologized. Love, they understood now, was less about grand gestures and more about daily choices. One afternoon, when Hope was 5, she asked a simple question. "Mama, how did you and Papa meet?" Emma and Daniel exchanged a glance. "In the rain," Daniel said with a smile. Hope gasped dramatically. "Like in a fairy tale?" Emma laughed softly. "Not exactly. I shared my umbrella." "And Papa was sad," Hope added, because she had heard the story many times. Daniel nodded. "And your mama was brave." Emma shook her head. "No, I was scared." Hope frowned. "Then why did you do it?" Emma knelt in front of her daughter. "Because sometimes," she said gently, "when something feels important, you take a small step anyway, even if you're afraid." Hope considered this deeply as children do. "Like when I go to school even if I miss you." "Exactly like that," Daniel said. As the years continued, life brought new chapters. Daniel's firm became well respected for sustainable architecture. Emma published her first full-length novel, a story about love that begins in the rain. It wasn't entirely their story, but pieces of it were woven between the lines. On the night of her book launch, Daniel stood in the back of the room holding Hope's hand as Emma spoke to a small crowd of readers. "People think love is something dramatic," she told the audience. "Something loud and unforgettable. But sometimes, love is quiet. It's patient. It grows slowly through shared umbrellas and difficult conversations." Her eyes found Daniel's. "And sometimes, love simply means choosing the same person tomorrow that you chose today." When the applause filled the room, Daniel felt tears in his eyes. Not because of her success, but because of the journey. Time, however, does what it always does. It moves forward. Daniel's father passed away peacefully when Hope was 8. It was a gentle goodbye, surrounded by family. Grief settled into their home like a heavy fog for a while. Hope didn't fully understand death, but she understood sadness. One evening, she crawled into Emma's lap and asked, "Will love go away too?" Emma held her tightly. "No," she whispered. "Love changes form, but it never disappears." Daniel, standing in the doorway, felt those words anchor themselves inside him. Because that was the truth of their story. Love had changed many times, from strangers under rain, to friends on a park bench, to frightened fiancés, to partners across distance, to husband and wife, to parents. It had shifted shape, but never disappeared. 20 years after that first rainy afternoon, Emma and Daniel stood once more outside the same old bookstore entrance. London had changed. The cafe across the street had a new name. The sidewalks were busier. Their hair carried streaks of silver now, but the sky looked the same, and as if on cue, rain began to fall. Daniel laughed softly. "It follows us." Emma opened her umbrella. "You still afraid of storms?" he asked. She looked at him, the man who had grown with her, broken with her, healed with her. "No," she said honestly. "Not anymore." They stood close under the umbrella, just as they had years ago. "Do you ever think," Daniel began, "what would have happened if you hadn't stepped forward that day?" Emma smiled gently. "I don't," she said, "because I did." The rain fell around them, but it no longer felt like something to escape. It felt like a reminder that love rarely begins perfectly, that fear and hope often arrive together, that ordinary moments can change everything. Daniel reached for her hand, just as he had done countless times before. And even after decades, her heart still responded the same way. Because love, they had learned, isn't built in a single moment. It's built in every choice to stay, every decision to listen, every willingness to grow, every small act of courage. As they walked home through the rain, slowly now without rushing, Emma felt a quiet certainty settle over her. Their story had never been about avoiding storms. It had always been about sharing the umbrella. And that, she realized, was more than enough